Mary I of England, often referred to as Bloody Mary, due to her persecution of Protestants, was born on February 18, 1516, at the Palace of Placentia in Greenwich, England. She was the only surviving child of King Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Her birth was a cause for celebration, as her parents had hoped for a male heir, but despite this, Mary was raised as the heir to the throne for many years. Her birth marked the beginning of a turbulent and often painful period in English history. Mary's early life was shaped by the constant political and religious upheavals of her father's reign. Henry VIII was desperate to have a male heir to secure the Tudor dynasty, and he quickly grew frustrated with Catherine of Aragon's inability to provide him with one. This frustration led Henry to seek a divorce from Catherine in the 1520s, a move that ultimately caused a rift with the Catholic Church. The Pope refused to annul Henry's marriage to Catherine, and in response, Henry broke from the Roman Catholic Church, establishing the Church of England in 1534. During this time, Mary, a devout Catholic, found herself at odds with her father. When Henry VIII declared himself the supreme head of the Church in England, he also declared that Mary was illegitimate and no longer in line for the throne. Mary was removed from the royal court and lived in relative obscurity for several years. She was also forced to deny the validity of her parents' marriage, which was deeply painful for her. Despite her father's rejection, Mary remained loyal to her Catholic faith, refusing to accept the religious reforms he had instituted. The situation became even more complicated when Henry VIII married Anne Boleyn in 1533. Anne, who was the mother of Elizabeth I, was executed in 1536, and after her death, Henry married Jane Seymour, who gave birth to Edward VI in 1537. The birth of a male heir, Edward, seemed to secure the Tudor line, but it also meant that Mary's position as the heir to the throne was further weakened. As a result, Mary lived much of her life in the shadow of her younger brother, Edward, and her half-sister Elizabeth. Edward VI ascended to the throne at the age of 9 in 1547, following Henry VIII's death. His reign was dominated by Protestant influences, and the young king's advisors pushed forward a series of Protestant reforms. The English Church was further separated from Rome, and many Catholic traditions were abandoned. As a devout Catholic, Mary was deeply disturbed by these changes and became determined to restore Catholicism to England when the opportunity arose. Edward VI's health was frail from an early age, and by 1553, he was gravely ill. As his condition worsened, the king's advisors, fearing that Mary would undo the Protestant reforms, decided to change the line of succession. In an effort to keep England Protestant, Edward named Lady Jane Grey, a Protestant cousin, as his successor, bypassing both Mary and Elizabeth. However, upon Edward's death in July 1553, the people of England, who were largely sympathetic to Mary, rallied to her cause. Mary's supporters quickly mobilized, and she was proclaimed Queen on July 19, 1553, just 9 days after Jane Grey had been crowned. Mary's ascension to the throne was not smooth. Lady Jane Grey, supported by a faction of nobles, attempted to maintain her claim to the throne, leading to a brief civil war. However, Jane was quickly overthrown, and Mary emerged as the undisputed Queen of England. Her first act as Queen was to restore Catholicism and reverse the Protestant reforms of her predecessors. She declared that the Pope was the rightful leader of the Catholic Church in England, and sought to reinstate the old religious practices that had been abolished during the reign of her father and brother. One of the most significant events of Mary's reign was her marriage to Philip II of Spain, which took place in 1554. Philip was the son of Emperor Charles V, and was a staunch Catholic. The marriage was part of Mary's effort to strengthen Catholicism in England, and to form an alliance with Spain. However, the marriage was deeply unpopular among the English people, who feared that it would lead to English involvement in Spanish wars and reduce England's independence. Mary's marriage to Philip was childless, and this lack of an heir would have lasting consequences for both Mary and the future of England. Perhaps the most infamous aspect of Mary's reign was her persecution of Protestants. Determined to root out heresy and restore Catholicism to England, Mary began a series of executions aimed at Protestant reformers. Between 1555 and 1558, more than 280 Protestants were burned at the stake, earning Mary the nickname Bloody Mary. The most notable victims of her religious persecution included the Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer, and the bishops Hugh Latimer and Nicholas Ridley. The executions were meant to send a strong message to those who resisted Catholicism, but they also sparked widespread fear and anger among the Protestant population. Despite her efforts to restore Catholicism, Mary's reign was marred by several failures. She was unable to produce an heir, and her marriage to Philip II was an unhappy one. Her health began to deteriorate in the late 1550s, and in 1558, she died of what is believed to have been cancer or ovarian failure. She was 42 years old at the time of her death. Mary's death marked the end of the Tudor dynasty's Catholic phase, and the beginning of the reign of her half-sister, Elizabeth I. Elizabeth would go on to firmly establish Protestantism as the state religion of England, and usher in an era of stability and prosperity. However, Mary's reign, though short and controversial, had lasting effects on the course of English history. Her attempts to reverse the Protestant reforms of her father and brother ultimately failed, but her actions helped shape the religious conflicts that would define the next century in England. Mary I is remembered as one of the most complex and controversial monarchs in English history. While her reign is often associated with her violent persecution of Protestants, it is also important to consider the difficult circumstances she faced. Born into a world of religious division and political instability, Mary tried to restore the Catholic faith she had inherited from her mother and her ancestors. Despite her failure to secure a lasting Catholic legacy, her reign was a pivotal moment in the turbulent religious history of England. Though her efforts were ultimately undone by her Protestant half-sister, Elizabeth I, Mary I's determination and resilience remain important aspects of her legacy. She was a queen who struggled with immense personal and political challenges, and her reign was shaped by the complex religious and political dynamics of her time. Mary's actions, while harsh, were a product of her deep commitment to her faith and her desire to restore what she saw as the rightful order of England's religious life. In the end, Mary I's reign was one of short-lived passion and intense conflict. She remains a controversial figure in English history, remembered both for her attempts to bring back Catholicism and for the brutal means by which she pursued her goal. Her legacy, though tarnished by her actions, is a reminder of the fierce struggles for religious and political control that marked the Tudor era.